The scorching sun beat down mercilessly on the immaculate driveway of the Blackwood estate, a sprawling mansion that seemed to touch the clouds with its imposing turrets and gleaming windows. At the foot of the grand staircase stood Jack Harper, a man whose weathered hands and kind eyes told a story of years of loyal service as the family's chauffeur. Jack's gaze was fixed on the polished black limousine before him, its surface reflecting the opulent world he had been a part of for over 2 decades. Little did he know that this day would mark the beginning of a journey that would test his resilience, challenge his morals, and ultimately lead to a revelation that would shake the very foundations of the Blackwood Empire. As he meticulously buffed the car's chrome accents, the mansion's ornate front doors burst open. Alexander Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Industries and Jack's employer, stormed out with his face contorted in fury. His designer suit, usually impeccable, was disheveled, and his silver hair stood on end as if electrified by his own rage. "Harper!" Blackwood bellowed, his voice carrying across the manicured lawn. "Get over here this instant!" Jack's heart sank. In all his years of service, he had never seen Mr. Blackwood in such a state. He hurried to the foot of the stairs, his cap clutched respectfully in his hands. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood?" Jack inquired, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. Alexander Blackwood's steel-gray eyes bore into Jack with an intensity that could have melted iron. "You incompetent fool," he spat, flecks of saliva flying from his lips. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jack's mind raced, searching for any mistake he might have made, but he came up empty. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand. What seems to be the problem?" Blackwood's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "The problem? The problem is that you've single-handedly cost me the biggest deal of my career." He thrust a crumpled piece of paper into Jack's face. This is what you've done." Jack gingerly took the paper, smoothing it out to reveal a series of photographs. His eyes widened in shock as he recognized himself in the images, but the context was all wrong. The photos showed him engaged in what appeared to be a clandestine meeting with Blackwood Industries' biggest rival, handing over what looked like confidential documents. "But sir," Jack stammered, his hands trembling, "these are fake. I've never." "Save your pathetic excuses," Blackwood roared, snatching the paper back. "I trusted you, Harper. I let you into my home, around my family. And this is how you repay me? By selling company secrets to the highest bidder?" Jack's world began to spin. He had dedicated his life to the Blackwoods, forsaking his own family time, missing his children's milestones, all in service to this man and his empire. And now, in the blink of an eye, it was all crumbling around him. "Mr. Blackwood, please," Jack pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. "There must be some mistake. I would never betray you or the company. I've been loyal for over 20 years. But Alexander Blackwood was beyond reason. His eyes gleamed with a cold, ruthless light that Jack had seen directed at business competitors but never at himself. "Your loyalty means nothing now, Harper. You're fired. I want you off my property within the hour, or I'll have security throw you out like the trash you are." With those cutting words, Blackwood turned on his heel and marched back into the mansion, leaving Jack standing alone in the driveway, his entire world shattered in mere moments. As if the heavens themselves sympathized with Jack's plight, dark clouds rolled in, obscuring the once brilliant sun. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, mirroring the turmoil in Jack's heart. Dazed and disoriented, Jack made his way to the small cottage on the edge of the Blackwood property that had been his home for the past 2 decades. As he opened the door, he was greeted by the smiling face of his wife, Sarah, her blonde hair tied back in a simple ponytail, her apron dusted with flour from her baking. "Jack, honey? You're home early," Sarah said, her smile fading as she took in her husband's ashen face. "What's wrong?" Jack collapsed into a kitchen chair, his head in his hands. "It's over, Sarah," he choked out. "Mr. Blackwood, he fired me. We have to leave. Now." Sarah's gasp of shock was drowned out by a clap of thunder outside. "But why? Jack, what happened?" As Jack recounted the bizarre confrontation, Sarah's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and finally, a steely determination. "This isn't right, Jack. We've given everything to that family. There has to be an explanation." But Jack shook his head, defeated. "It doesn't matter now. We have less than an hour to pack up our lives and leave. We have to think about the children." As if on cue, the front door burst open, and Jack and Sarah's teenage children, Emily and Michael, rushed in, soaked from the sudden downpour. "Dad? Mom? What's going on?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with concern as she took in the tense scene before her. Jack looked at his family, his heart breaking at the thought of uprooting them from the only home they'd ever known. But he knew he had to be strong for them now more than ever. "Kids, sit down," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "We need to talk." As Jack explained the situation to his stunned children, the rain outside intensified, lashing against the windows like nature's own tears for the injustice unfolding within the cottage walls. Across the property, in the opulent study of the main house, Alexander Blackwood poured himself a generous glass of scotch, his hand shaking slightly as he raised it to his lips. He stared out the window at the raging storm, a flicker of doubt crossing his face for just a moment before being replaced by a mask of cold resolve. It had to be done, he muttered to himself, taking another swig of the amber liquid. For the good of the company, for the family. But even as he tried to convince himself, a nagging voice in the back of his mind whispered that perhaps he had made a terrible mistake. A mistake that would set in motion a chain of events that would expose long-buried secrets and threaten to destroy everything he had built. Back in the cottage, the Harper family scrambled to pack their belongings, tears mixing with the rain that had begun to seep through the old roof. As Jack placed the last box in their beat-up station wagon, he cast one final glance at the mansion looming in the distance. "I don't know how," he said, his voice barely audible above the storm, "but someday, I'll clear my name. And the truth will come out, no matter what it takes." Little did Jack know that his words were more prophetic than he could have imagined. For deep within the Blackwood mansion, hidden away in a secret safe, lay a document that would not only exonerate Jack but also expose a web of lies and deceit that stretched back generations. As the Harpers drove away from the only home they had known for years, the storm seemed to follow them, a portent of the tumultuous journey that lay ahead. But amidst the darkness, a small flame of hope flickered in Jack's heart. He may have lost his job, his home, and his reputation, but he still had his family and his integrity. And with those, he knew he could face whatever challenges awaited them. The rain-slicked roads stretched out before them, leading to an uncertain future. But as they drove into the night, Jack made a silent vow. He would not only reclaim his honor but also uncover the truth behind his unjust dismissal, no matter the cost. Little did he know that this vow would set him on a collision course with forces far more powerful and dangerous than he could have ever imagined. As the Harpers' car disappeared into the stormy night, the sprawling Blackwood estate stood silent and imposing against the turbulent sky. Within its walls, secrets simmered, ready to boil over and change the lives of everyone involved forever. The next morning dawned gray and dreary, matching the mood of the Harper family as they pulled into the parking lot of the Sundown Motel, a dilapidated establishment on the outskirts of the nearby town of Millbrook. The neon sign flickered weakly, several letters burnt out, a far cry from the luxury they had grown accustomed to on the Blackwood estate. Jack sighed heavily as he turned off the engine, the car sputtering to a halt. "It's not much," he said, trying to inject some optimism into his voice, "but it'll do until we figure things out." Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with a mixture of worry and determination. "We're together, Jack. That's what matters." As they unloaded their meager belongings into the musty motel room, Emily and Michael exchanged glances, their teenage faces a mix of confusion and resentment. They had been uprooted from their friends, their school, and the only life they'd ever known, all because of some inexplicable mishap involving their father. "Dad," Michael ventured as they settled into the cramped room, "what exactly happened back there?" "I mean, Mr. Blackwood's always been kind of a jerk, but this seems extreme even for him." Jack sat heavily on the edge of one of the beds, the springs creaking in protest. He ran a hand through his graying hair, the weight of the situation evident in the new lines that seemed to have appeared overnight on his face. "I wish I knew, son," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Those photos, they were fake, I'm sure of it. But why? Why would someone go to such lengths to frame me?" Emily, always the more analytical of the two siblings, furrowed her brow in thought. "There has to be more to this story," she mused. "Dad, is there anything at all, that you might have seen or heard while working for the Blackwoods that could explain this?" Jack's mind raced, sifting through years of memories, conversations overheard, documents glimpsed. Suddenly, a fragment of a memory surfaced, something he had dismissed as unimportant at the time. "There was something," he said slowly, his eyes focusing on a point in the distance as he tried to recall the details. "About a month ago, I was driving Mr. Blackwood to a meeting. He was on the phone, arguing with someone. I couldn't hear much, but he mentioned something about Project Phoenix and how it had to be kept under wraps at all costs." Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. "Project Phoenix? What could that be?" Jack shook his head. "I don't know. But the way he was talking, it sounded big. And potentially illegal." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications of this revelation sank in. Could Jack's dismissal be connected to this mysterious project? And if so, how deep did the rabbit hole go? Meanwhile, back at the Blackwood estate, Alexander Blackwood paced his study, a tumbler of scotch in hand despite the early hour. His usual confident demeanor was gone, replaced by a nervous energy that radiated from him in waves. A soft knock at the door made him jump. "Come in," he barked, quickly composing himself. His wife, Victoria Blackwood, glided into the room, her elegant features marred by a look of concern. "Alexander, darling, what's going on? I saw the Harpers leaving last night in quite a hurry. And in this dreadful weather, no less." Alexander turned away, unable to meet his wife's questioning gaze. "I had to let Jack go," he said brusquely. "He was compromised." Victoria's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Jack? But he's been with us for years. Surely there must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," Alexander snapped, his grip tightening on the glass. "I saw the evidence with my own eyes. He was selling company secrets to our competitors." Victoria studied her husband carefully, noting the beads of sweat on his forehead, the slight tremor in his hand. In all their years of marriage, she had never seen him this rattled. "Alexander," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm, "what aren't you telling me? This isn't just about Jack, is it?" For a moment, it seemed as though Alexander might confide in her. His shoulders sagged, and he opened his mouth to speak. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the moment of vulnerability passed. His face hardened once more into the mask of the ruthless businessman she knew so well. "It's nothing for you to worry about, my dear," he said, patting her hand dismissively. "Just some necessary business dealings. Everything will be fine." But as Victoria left the study, unconvinced by her husband's assurances, she couldn't shake the feeling that their perfectly manicured life was about to be turned upside down. Across town, in a sleek high-rise office, a woman sat behind a massive desk, her fingers steepled as she listened intently to the voice on the other end of the phone. "So, it's done?" she asked, her tone cool and measured. "Harper has been removed from the equation?" "Yes, Miss Sinclair," the voice replied. Blackwood took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Harper is out, and Project Phoenix remains secure. A smile played at the corners of the woman's lips. "Excellent work. Keep me informed of any developments. We're too close to let anything jeopardize our plans now." As she hung up the phone, Evelyn Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Enterprises and Blackwood Industries' fiercest rival, allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place perfectly. Soon, very soon, she would have everything she had worked for. Little did she know that her carefully laid plans were about to be challenged by the very man she thought she had neutralized. Back at the Sundown Motel, Jack Harper sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. The weight of their situation pressed down on him like a physical force. How had his life unraveled so completely in the span of a single day? Sarah sat beside him, rubbing soothing circles on his back. "We'll get through this, Jack," she murmured. "We always have." Jack lifted his head, his eyes meeting those of his wife. In her gaze, he found the strength he needed to push forward. "You're right," he said, straightening his shoulders. "This isn't over. I've been loyal to the Blackwoods for over 2 decades. I won't let my reputation be destroyed by a lie." Emily, who had been tapping away at her laptop, suddenly let out a gasp. "Dad, Mom, you need to see this." The family huddled around the computer screen, their eyes widening as they took in the headlines splashed across the local news website. Blackwood Industries under investigation, allegations of fraud and insider trading. It says here that the SEC has launched a probe into Blackwood Industries' financial practices, Emily read aloud, her voice trembling with excitement. "They're looking into suspicious stock activity and potential misuse of company funds." Jack's mind raced. Could this be connected to the mysterious Project Phoenix? And more importantly, could this be the key to clearing his name? "We need to dig deeper," Jack said, a newfound determination in his voice. "If Blackwood is involved in something illegal, it might explain why he was so quick to get rid of me. Maybe he thought I knew something." Michael, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "But Dad, how are we supposed to investigate this? We don't have any resources, and Mr. Blackwood is one of the most powerful men in the state." Jack placed a hand on his son's shoulder, a glimmer of his old confidence returning to his eyes. "We may not have money or influence, but we have something just as valuable, the truth. And we have each other." Jack's words hung in the air, filling the cramped motel room with a renewed sense of purpose. The Harper family exchanged determined glances, each silently vowing to do whatever it took to uncover the truth and clear Jack's name. "All right," Sarah said, taking charge. "We need a plan. Emily, you're our tech expert. Can you dig deeper into this investigation? See if you can find any connections to Project Phoenix?" Emily nodded, her fingers already flying across the keyboard. "I'm on it, Mom. I'll set up some alerts for any news about Blackwood Industries or Alexander Blackwood himself. Michael," Jack turned to his son, "I need you to reach out to some of your friends from school. Their parents work for Blackwood Industries too. See if you can discreetly find out if anyone else has been fired recently or if there have been any strange goings-on at the company." Michael hesitated for a moment, then squared his shoulders. "Okay, Dad. I'll be careful." "And me?" Sarah asked, her eyes meeting Jack's. Jack took her hand, squeezing it gently. "I need you to help me retrace my steps, Sarah. We've been with the Blackwoods for so long. There must be something we've overlooked, some clue that could help us understand what's really going on." As the Harper family began their clandestine investigation, little did they know that their actions were sending ripples through the carefully constructed facade of Millbrook's elite. Back at the Blackwood estate, Alexander Blackwood sat in his study, nursing yet another glass of scotch. The morning paper lay crumpled on his desk, the headlines about the SEC investigation glaring up at him accusingly. A soft knock at the door jolted him from his brooding. "Come in," he called, his voice hoarse. Victoria Blackwood entered, her face a mask of concern. "Alexander, we need to talk. This investigation, it's all over the news." "What's going on?" Alexander waved a dismissive hand, but the gesture lacked its usual confidence. "It's nothing, my dear. Just a routine inquiry. Our lawyers will handle it." Victoria's eyes narrowed. She'd been married to Alexander long enough to know when he was hiding something. "Is this why you fired Jack? Was he asking questions?" For a moment, Alexander's carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing a flash of panic. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Jack's dismissal is a separate matter entirely. I told you, he was compromised." "And I don't believe you," Victoria said, her voice low but firm. 20 years of loyal service, and suddenly he's a traitor? It doesn't add up, Alexander. What aren't you telling me?" Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face paling slightly. "I have to take this," he muttered, turning away from his wife. Victoria watched him for a moment, her heart heavy with the realization that the man she had married was slipping away, buried under layers of secrets and lies. As she left the study, she made a silent vow of her own: she would get to the bottom of this, with or without her husband's cooperation. Across town, in her sleek office, Evelyn Sinclair was also dealing with the fallout from the SEC announcement. She paced back and forth, her Louboutin heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor as she spoke into her phone. "I don't care how you do it, Johnson, but I need that information," she hissed. "If the SEC starts digging too deep, we're all exposed. Find out who tipped them off and shut them down. Permanently if necessary." As she ended the call, Evelyn allowed herself a moment of doubt. Had she pushed too far? Was her vendetta against Alexander Blackwood worth the risk? But then she remembered the pain, the humiliation she had suffered at his hands years ago, and her resolve hardened once more. "You took everything from me once, Alexander," she murmured, gazing out at the Millbrook skyline. "Now it's my turn to return the favor." Meanwhile, in a small cafe on the outskirts of town, Jack Harper sat across from an old friend, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee. Tom Reynolds had been Jack's classmate in high school and now worked as a beat reporter for the local newspaper. "I appreciate you meeting me, Tom," Jack said, his voice low. "I didn't know who else to turn to." Tom leaned forward, his eyes alight with journalistic curiosity. "When you called, I could hardly believe it." Jack Harper, golden boy of the Blackwood estate, suddenly unemployed and asking for help? "What's really going on, Jack?" Jack took a deep breath and began to recount the events of the past few days. As he spoke, Tom's expression shifted from skepticism to shock and finally to grim determination. "This is big, Jack," Tom said when Jack had finished. "If what you're saying is true, it could bring down one of the most powerful men in the state. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" Jack met his friend's gaze steadily. "I don't have a choice, Tom. They've taken everything from me, my job, my home, my reputation. All I have left is the truth, and I'll be damned if I let them take that too." Tom nodded, pulling out a small notebook. "All right, then. Let's start at the beginning. Tell me everything you remember about Project Phoenix." As Jack delved into the details he could recall, neither man noticed the figure sitting in a booth across the cafe, their face hidden behind a newspaper, listening intently to every word. Back at the Sundown Motel, Emily's excited voice broke the tense silence. "Guys, I think I found something. The family gathered around her laptop, peering at the screen. I've been digging into Blackwood Industries' financial records, Emily explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Most of it is pretty standard stuff, but there's this one subsidiary that doesn't quite fit. She pulled up a complex web of financial transactions. See this company here? Phoenix Ventures. It was established about 6 months ago, right around the time Dad overheard that phone call. On paper, it looks like a normal tech startup, but the money flowing through it, it's astronomical. Jack's brow furrowed as he studied the figures. Those numbers can't be right. There's no way a new company could be generating that kind of revenue. Exactly, Emily said, her eyes shining with the thrill of discovery. I think it's a front. They're using Phoenix Ventures to funnel money, but for what? Before anyone could speculate further, there was a sharp knock at the door. The Harpers froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Who could have found them here? Michael moved to the window, carefully peering out. His eyes widened in surprise. Dad, he whispered, it's Mrs. Blackwood. Jack's heart raced as he approached the door. What could Victoria Blackwood possibly want? Was this a trap? Or could she be an unexpected ally? Taking a deep breath, Jack opened the door. Victoria stood before him, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. Jack, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'm so sorry to intrude, but I need your help. I think Alexander is in terrible danger, and you might be the only one who can save him. The tension in the room was palpable as Victoria Blackwood stepped inside, her eyes darting nervously around the cramped motel room. The Harper family watched her warily, unsure whether to trust this unexpected visitor. Jack cleared his throat, breaking the awkward silence. Mrs. Blackwood. Victoria, what do you mean Alexander is in danger? What's going on? Victoria sank into a chair, her usual poise crumbling. I'm not sure of all the details, but something is terribly wrong. Alexander has been acting strangely for months now, secretive phone calls, late nights at the office, unexplained cash withdrawals. And now this SEC investigation. She looked up at Jack, her eyes pleading. I know he fired you, Jack, and I'm so sorry. But you've been with us for so long. If anyone can help unravel this mess, it's you. Sarah stepped forward, her maternal instincts kicking in despite her reservations. She handed Victoria a glass of water, which the older woman accepted gratefully. Victoria, Sarah said gently, we want to help, but we need more information. What do you know about Project Phoenix? Victoria's eyes widened in surprise. How do you know about that? She gasped. Jack quickly explained about the overheard phone call and their subsequent discoveries. As he spoke, Victoria's face grew increasingly pale. Oh God, she whispered when he had finished. It's worse than I thought. Jack, Sarah. Alexander didn't want to involve you in this, but I think he made a terrible mistake. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. About a year ago, Alexander was approached by a group of investors. They promised unprecedented returns if he would help them with a special project. At first, it all seemed above board, just another tech venture. But then, Victoria's voice trailed off, her hands shaking slightly. Emily, who had been listening intently, gently prompted her. Then what, Mrs. Blackwood? Then the demands started, Victoria continued. They wanted access to Blackwood Industries' client data, insider information about mergers and acquisitions. Alexander tried to back out, but they threatened him. Said they would ruin him if he didn't cooperate. Jack's mind raced, pieces of the puzzle starting to fall into place. And the photos of me? The ones Alexander used as an excuse to fire me? Victoria nodded sadly. I think they were planted. Alexander probably thought he was protecting you by cutting ties completely. The room fell silent as everyone processed this new information. Finally, Michael spoke up. So what do we do now? How can we help Mr. Blackwood without getting caught in the crossfire ourselves? Jack stood up, a new determination in his eyes. We need to gather evidence. Concrete proof of what's really going on with Project Phoenix. Victoria, can you get us access to Alexander's home office? Victoria hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I think so. He's at a board meeting all day tomorrow. I could let you in then. Good, Jack said. Emily, I'll need you to come with me. Your tech skills might come in handy if we need to access any digital files. Sarah touched Jack's arm, her face etched with concern. Jack, are you sure about this? It could be dangerous. Jack took her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. I know, love. But we've come too far to back down now. Besides, he added with a wry smile, what's the worst that could happen? I've already been fired. As the group continued to plan their covert operation, none of them noticed the small, blinking light of a hidden camera in the corner of the room, silently transmitting every word of their conversation to an unknown observer. Miles away, in a dimly lit room filled with monitors, Evelyn Sinclair watched the scene unfold with growing interest. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face as she listened to Victoria Blackwood spill her husband's secrets. Oh, Alexander, she purred, leaning back in her chair. You should have known better than to think you could outmaneuver me. And now, thanks to your meddling wife and that fool of a chauffeur, I'll have everything I need to bring you down once and for all. She pressed a button on her desk, and moments later, a burly man in a dark suit entered the room. Johnson, she said, her voice cool and commanding, I have a new assignment for you. I need you to follow Jack Harper and his little family. Let them do the dirty work for us, and then, well, make sure they don't live to tell about it. Johnson nodded silently and left the room. Evelyn turned back to the monitors, watching as the Harper family and Victoria continued their plotting, blissfully unaware of the danger that now stalked them. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tension that filled the air as Jack and Emily prepared for their mission. Sarah fussed over them, checking and rechecking the burner phones they had purchased for communication. Remember, she said, her voice tight with worry, if anything seems off, anything at all, you get out of there immediately. Promise me. Jack pulled her into a tight embrace. I promise, love. We'll be careful. As Jack and Emily left the motel, Michael watched from the window, a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were all in way over their heads. Across town, Alexander Blackwood kissed his wife goodbye, completely unaware of her part in the unfolding drama. I'll be home late, he said distractedly, already scrolling through emails on his phone. Don't wait up. Victoria watched him drive away, her heart heavy with the weight of her deception. She glanced at her watch, Jack and Emily would be arriving soon. She only hoped she was doing the right thing. At precisely 10 a.m., a nondescript van pulled up to the service entrance of the Blackwood estate. Jack and Emily, dressed in maintenance uniforms, stepped out, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Victoria met them at the door, ushering them quickly inside. Alexander's office is on the second floor, she whispered. I've disabled the security cameras, but we don't have much time. The cleaning staff will be here in 2 hours. Jack nodded gratefully. Thank you, Victoria. We'll be as quick as we can. As they made their way to Alexander's office, Emily couldn't help but marvel at the opulence surrounding them. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artworks, plush carpets, it was a far cry from the dingy motel room they now called home. Finally, they reached the imposing oak door of Alexander's private sanctuary. Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she inserted the key. "Good luck," she murmured, stepping aside to let them enter. The office was immaculate, every surface gleaming, every paper perfectly aligned. Jack and Emily exchanged a determined glance before getting to work. While Jack began methodically searching through file cabinets and drawers, Emily booted up the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she attempted to bypass the security measures. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours as they searched. Sweat beaded on Jack's forehead as he rifled through document after document, finding nothing out of the ordinary. Had they been wrong about all of this? Suddenly, Emily let out a soft gasp. "Dad," she whispered urgently, "I think I found something." Jack hurried over to the computer, his eyes widening as he took in the information on the screen. It was a series of emails between Alexander and an unnamed contact, discussing large transfers of funds and mentioning Project Phoenix repeatedly. "This is it," Jack breathed. "This proves Alexander was being coerced. We need to copy these files and—" His words were cut short by the sound of a key in the lock. Jack and Emily froze, their hearts pounding as the door slowly opened. But it wasn't Alexander who entered. Instead, they found themselves face to face with a woman they had never seen before, tall, elegant, with piercing green eyes that seemed to look right through them. Well, Evelyn Sinclair said, a cold smile playing on her lips. "What do we have here?" The loyal chauffeur and his little helper, playing detective. How quaint. Before Jack or Emily could react, two large men appeared behind Evelyn, their hands resting ominously on the guns at their hips. "I'm afraid your little investigation ends here," Evelyn continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "But don't worry. You'll have plenty of time to discuss your findings in jail." As the men moved to apprehend them, Jack's mind raced. How had they been discovered? And more importantly, how were they going to get out of this mess? Meanwhile, back at the motel, Sarah paced nervously, checking her phone every few seconds for any word from Jack or Emily. Michael watched her, his own anxiety growing with each passing minute. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "maybe we should call the police. Something feels wrong." Sarah shook her head, though her eyes betrayed her fear. "We can't risk it, not yet. If we're wrong, we could make things even worse for your father." Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. She snatched it up, her face paling as she read the message. "Oh God," she whispered, her hand trembling. Michael was at her side in an instant, peering over her shoulder at the cryptic text, "Trapped. Office. ES help." "It's from Emily," Sarah breathed, her mind racing. "Something's gone wrong. They've been caught." Michael's heart pounded in his chest as the gravity of the situation sank in. "What do we do, Mom? We can't just leave them there." Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly despite the panic threatening to overwhelm her. "We need help," she said finally. "But who can we trust?" As if in answer to her question, there was a sharp knock at the motel room door. Sarah and Michael froze, exchanging alarmed glances. Had they been found? Was this the end of their desperate quest for justice? With trembling hands, Sarah approached the door, peering through the peephole. Her eyes widened in surprise. "It's Victoria Blackwood," she whispered to Michael. Cautiously, Sarah opened the door. Victoria stood there, her usual poise replaced by an air of urgency and fear. "Sarah," she said breathlessly, "we have a problem. Alexander came home early. He knows something's wrong." Sarah quickly ushered Victoria inside, filling her in on the distress message from Emily. Victoria's face paled as she listened. "This is all my fault," she murmured. "I never should have involved you all in this mess." "It's too late for regrets now," Sarah said firmly. "We need to focus on getting Jack and Emily out of there." "But how?" Victoria's eyes suddenly lit up with an idea. "I think I know someone who can help. But you'll have to trust me." Back at the Blackwood estate, Jack and Emily found themselves in a tense standoff with Evelyn Sinclair and her thugs. Jack's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. "Who are you?" he demanded, subtly positioning himself in front of Emily. "What do you want?" Evelyn's lips curled into a cold smile. "Oh, Jack. So loyal, so clueless. I'm the woman who's going to bring the mighty Alexander Blackwood to his knees. And you, my dear, are going to help me do it." Before Jack could respond, the office door burst open once more. Alexander Blackwood himself stood in the doorway, his face a mask of shock and fury as he took in the scene before him. "Evelyn," he growled, his eyes narrowing. "I should have known you were behind this." Evelyn turned to face him, her smile never wavering. "Alexander, darling. How kind of you to join us. We were just discussing your imminent downfall." As the two titans of industry faced off, Jack's mind whirled. Who was this woman? What was her connection to Alexander? And more importantly, how could he use this unexpected development to get Emily to safety? Across town, Sarah, Michael, and Victoria huddled in a dimly lit parking garage, waiting nervously for Victoria's mysterious contact to arrive. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with worry. "How do you know we can trust this person?" Victoria's eyes were filled with a mixture of determination and fear. "Because," she said softly, "he has just as much to lose as we do if the truth about Project Phoenix comes out." Before Sarah could press for more details, a sleek black car pulled into the garage, its engine purring quietly. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, distinguished, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Victoria stepped forward. "Senator Thompson," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Thank you for coming." Sarah and Michael exchanged shocked glances. Senator James Thompson was one of the most powerful politicians in the state. What was his connection to all of this? The senator nodded gravely. "Victoria filled me in on the situation. I must say, I'm deeply troubled by what I've heard. If even half of it is true, we're looking at a scandal that could rock the very foundations of our government." He turned to Sarah and Michael, his gaze intense. "Mrs. Harper, I understand your husband and daughter are in danger. I want you to know that I'll do everything in my power to ensure their safety. But first, I need you to tell me everything you know about Project Phoenix." As Sarah began to recount their discoveries, none of them noticed the small drone hovering silently above the garage, its camera capturing every word and gesture. Miles away, in a high-tech surveillance room, a figure watched the scene unfold with growing interest. Well, a silky voice murmured. "It seems our little game has some new players. This should be entertaining." Back at the Blackwood estate, the tension in Alexander's office was palpable. Jack and Emily stood frozen, caught between Evelyn's thugs and Alexander's imposing presence. "How dare you come into my home?" Alexander snarled at Evelyn. "Whatever game you're playing, it ends now." Evelyn's laugh was like ice. "Oh, Alexander. You poor, deluded fool. The game is already over. You just don't know it yet." She turned to her men. "Take them all. We'll sort this out somewhere more private." As the thugs moved to apprehend them, Jack saw his chance. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a heavy paperweight from Alexander's desk and hurled it at the nearest goon. The man went down with a grunt of pain, creating just enough chaos for Jack to shout, "Emily, run!" Emily didn't hesitate. She bolted for the door, slipping past the surprised thugs. Jack moved to follow, but a sharp blow to the back of his head sent him crashing to the floor, darkness engulfing him. When Jack regained consciousness, he found himself in a dimly lit room, his hands bound behind his back. As his vision cleared, he realized he wasn't alone. Alexander Blackwood sat across from him, similarly restrained, his usually impeccable appearance now disheveled and bloody. "Jack," Alexander said, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." Before Jack could respond, the door swung open, and Evelyn Sinclair sauntered in, a triumphant smile on her face. "Gentlemen," she purred, "I do hope you're comfortable. We have so much to discuss." Meanwhile, Emily raced through the streets of Millbrook, her lungs burning as she pushed herself to keep running. She had no idea where she was going, only that she needed to get as far away from the Blackwood estate as possible. As she rounded a corner, she collided hard with someone, sending them both sprawling to the ground. Emily looked up, ready to apologize and keep running, when she realized who she had run into. "Mom?" she gasped, hardly daring to believe her eyes. Sarah pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace, tears of relief streaming down her face. "Oh, Emily! Thank God you're safe." As they clung to each other, Senator Thompson and Victoria approached, followed closely by Michael. "Where's Jack?" Victoria asked, her eyes scanning the street behind Emily. Emily's face crumpled as the full weight of what had happened hit her. "They've got him," she sobbed. "Dad and Mr. Blackwood. Some woman named Evelyn took them." Senator Thompson's face hardened at the mention of Evelyn's name. "Evelyn Sinclair," he said grimly. "I should have known she'd be involved in this." Sarah turned to the senator, her eyes blazing with determination. "You said you'd help us. Now's the time. We need to rescue Jack and Alexander before it's too late." The senator nodded, pulling out his phone. "I'll make some calls. We'll need backup for this." As the group huddled together, formulating a plan to rescue Jack and Alexander, they were unaware of the wheels already in motion, wheels that would soon bring all the players in this high-stakes game to an explosive confrontation. In the basement of an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Millbrook, Jack and Alexander sat in tense silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The room was damp and musty, with only a single flickering bulb casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls. "I suppose you have questions," Alexander said finally, breaking the silence. Jack let out a bitter laugh. "That's an understatement. How about we start with who the hell that woman is and why she seems to have a personal vendetta against you?" Alexander sighed heavily, the weight of years of secrets evident in his slumped shoulders. "Evelyn Sinclair," he said, the name dripping with a mixture of regret and contempt. "She was my business partner many years ago. And my lover." Jack's eyebrows shot up in surprise. This was certainly not what he had expected. "We were young, ambitious," Alexander continued, his eyes distant with memory. "We had dreams of building an empire together. But Evelyn, her ambition knew no bounds. She wanted to cut corners, make deals with people we had no business dealing with. When I refused, she took it as a personal betrayal. So all of this, Project Phoenix, the SEC investigation, my firing, it's all part of her revenge plot?" Jack asked, trying to piece together the puzzle. Alexander nodded grimly. Project Phoenix was supposed to be our crowning achievement, a revolutionary AI system that could predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy. But Evelyn wanted to use it for insider trading, to manipulate the markets on a global scale. When I discovered her plans, I tried to shut it down. That's when things got complicated. Before Jack could press for more details, the door swung open, and Evelyn sauntered in, flanked by her thugs. "Having a nice chat, boys?" she asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I do hope I'm not interrupting." She turned to Jack, her eyes glittering with malice. "I must say, Mr. Harper, you've proven to be quite the thorn in my side. I had such hopes that framing you would be the end of it. But here you are, still meddling in affairs far beyond your understanding." Jack met her gaze defiantly. "If you're going to kill us, just get it over with." Evelyn's laugh was like shards of glass. "Oh, Jack. Death would be far too simple. No, I have much grander plans for you both. You see, in about an hour, a very incriminating video will be released to the media, a video showing Alexander Blackwood confessing to all manner of financial crimes, with his faithful chauffeur as a willing accomplice." Alexander's face paled. "You can't do this, Evelyn. You'll destroy everything, not just me, but thousands of innocent employees, shareholders." "Collateral damage," Evelyn said dismissively. "A small price to pay for justice." As she turned to leave, Jack called out, "You won't get away with this. My family knows the truth. They'll expose you." Evelyn paused at the door, a cold smile playing on her lips. "Your family? Oh, Jack. Did you really think I'd leave such loose ends untied? As we speak, my men are paying a visit to that charming little motel you've been calling home. By morning, there will be no one left to contradict my version of events." With that chilling proclamation, she swept out of the room, leaving Jack and Alexander in stunned, horrified silence. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah, Emily, Michael, Victoria, and Senator Thompson had gathered in the senator's private office, surrounded by maps and documents relating to Project Phoenix. "According to my sources," the senator was saying, "Evelyn Sinclair has been operating out of an abandoned industrial complex on the edge of town. If Jack and Alexander are anywhere, it's likely to be there." Sarah nodded, her face set with determination. "Then that's where we need to go. But how do we get past her security?" Victoria, who had been quietly studying the documents, suddenly spoke up. "I think I might have an idea. But it's risky, and we'll need help, preferably someone with technical skills." All eyes turned to Emily, who straightened her shoulders, a glint of determination in her eyes. "Whatever it is, I'm in. We need to save Dad and Mr. Blackwood." As Victoria began to outline her plan, none of them noticed the small, blinking device hidden beneath the senator's desk, a listening device that was transmitting every word to an unknown party. In a sleek, high-tech van parked a few blocks away, a figure hunched over a bank of monitors, a slow smile spreading across their face as they listened to the group's plans unfold. "Oh, this is going to be fun," the figure murmured, reaching for a phone. "Boss, you're not going to believe what I just heard." As the night deepened, the various players in this high-stakes game moved into position, each unaware of the true scope of the forces aligned against them. In the abandoned warehouse, Jack and Alexander worked frantically to free themselves from their bonds, knowing that time was running out not just for them, but for everyone they loved. Across town, Sarah led her makeshift team towards the industrial complex, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She had no idea what they would face when they arrived, but she knew one thing for certain: she would not rest until Jack was safe and the truth about Project Phoenix was revealed to the world. And somewhere in the shadows, Evelyn Sinclair watched and waited, confident that her long-awaited revenge was finally within reach. Little did she know that her carefully laid plans were about to collide with a force she had never anticipated: the unbreakable bonds of family and the power of truth to overcome even the darkest of lies. As the first hints of dawn began to streak the sky, the stage was set for a confrontation that would change the lives of everyone involved forever. The final act of this twisted drama was about to begin, and only one thing was certain: by the time the sun rose fully, the world as they knew it would never be the same again. Sarah's heart raced as she led her unlikely team through the shadows of the industrial complex. The looming structures of long-abandoned factories cast eerie silhouettes against the pre-dawn sky, their broken windows like hollow eyes watching their every move. According to the blueprints, Senator Thompson whispered, consulting his phone, there should be a side entrance just around this corner. It's likely to be guarded. Victoria nodded, her face set with determination. Remember the plan. Emily, are you ready? Emily clutched her laptop bag tightly, her knuckles white but her voice steady. Ready as I'll ever be. As they rounded the corner, they saw two burly men standing guard at a rusty metal door. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the moment of truth. Michael stepped forward, a mischievous glint in his eye despite the gravity of the situation. "Show time," he murmured. With a deep breath, Michael stumbled out of the shadows, affecting a drunken swagger. "Hey, fellas," he called out, his words deliberately slurred. "Is this the way to the thing? You know, the big party?" The guards exchanged confused glances, momentarily distracted by this unexpected interruption. It was all the opening Emily needed. Her fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, and suddenly, the industrial complex was plunged into darkness as the power grid she had hacked into went offline. In the chaos that ensued, Sarah and the others moved swiftly. Senator Thompson, revealing a surprising level of physical prowess for a man his age, quickly incapacitated one guard while Victoria, wielding a taser she had procured from God knows where, took down the other. Quickly, Sarah hissed as they rushed through the now unguarded door. "We don't have much time before the backup generators kick in." As they navigated the dark, maze-like corridors of the warehouse, guided only by the dim light of their phones, Sarah's mind raced. Were they too late? Had Evelyn already carried out her threat against Jack and Alexander? Meanwhile, in their makeshift prison, Jack and Alexander had managed to work their bonds loose. They froze as they heard the power cut out, plunging them into total darkness. "What the hell was that?" Alexander whispered. Jack's heart leapt with a mixture of hope and fear. It could be help, or it could be Evelyn making her final move. Either way, this might be our only chance. Together, they fumbled in the darkness towards where they remembered the door to be. To their surprise, they found it unlocked. In the confusion of the power outage, their captors had neglected to secure it properly. "This is our chance," Jack whispered urgently. "We need to move, now." Alexander nodded, though Jack could barely make out the gesture in the darkness. Cautiously, they eased the door open and slipped into the corridor beyond. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow, creating more shadows than illumination. "Do you have any idea where we are?" Jack asked as they crept along, every nerve on high alert. Alexander's voice was grim. "I have a hunch. If I'm right, we're in the old Sinclair Electronics factory. It was Evelyn's first major acquisition after our falling out." As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Jack's mind raced. If Sarah and the others had indeed come to rescue them, how would they find each other in this maze? And more pressingly, where was Evelyn? Their questions were answered moments later as they rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of armed men, led by none other than Evelyn Sinclair herself. Well, Evelyn drawled, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Look who decided to join the party. I must say, I'm impressed by your resourcefulness. But did you really think escape would be that easy?" Before Jack or Alexander could respond, a commotion erupted from further down the corridor. To Jack's amazement and horror, he saw Sarah, Emily, and Michael being roughly escorted by more of Evelyn's thugs. Senator Thompson and Victoria Blackwood followed, looking equally defeated. Dad!" Emily cried out, her voice a mixture of relief and fear. "Silence!" Evelyn snapped, her composure slipping for a moment. She turned to Jack and Alexander, a triumphant smile playing on her lips. "You see, gentlemen? I always win. Your little rescue party has only sealed their own fates." Alexander stepped forward, his voice low and intense. "Evelyn, please. This vendetta has gone on long enough. Whatever grievances you have against me, these people are innocent. Let them go, and I'll give you whatever you want." Evelyn's laugh was cold and brittle. "Oh, Alexander. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you anymore. Project Phoenix was meant to revolutionize the world, to bring about a new era of financial control. And you," she jabbed a finger at his chest, "you tried to shut it down because of your outdated moral qualms." As Evelyn launched into a monologue about her grand vision, Jack caught Sarah's eye. With the slightest of nods, he signaled to her, hoping she would understand. Sarah's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and she gave a tiny nod in return. In that silent exchange, a plan formed. Years of working together, of shared experiences and unspoken understanding, allowed them to communicate volumes in a single glance. "You're right, Evelyn," Jack said suddenly, cutting into her tirade. "We were fools to think we could stop you. Project Phoenix is too big, too important." Evelyn paused, suspicion warring with satisfaction on her face. Well. It seems the loyal chauffeur has finally seen reason. But I'm afraid it's too little, too late." "Is it?" Jack pressed, taking a careful step forward. "Think about it. With Alexander's connections and my inside knowledge of how the other half lives, we could be valuable assets to your operation." Alexander, catching on quickly, nodded in agreement. "Jack's right. We were short-sighted before, but now we see the potential. Project Phoenix could change everything." Evelyn's eyes narrowed as she considered their words. "And why should I believe this sudden change of heart?" "Because," Jack said, taking another step closer, "we have something you need. Something that could make Project Phoenix truly unstoppable." As Jack spoke, he saw Sarah slowly inching her way towards one of the armed guards, Emily and Michael following her lead. Senator Thompson and Victoria, though confused, seemed to sense that something was happening and remained still, drawing no attention to themselves. Evelyn, her attention fully focused on Jack and Alexander, didn't notice the subtle movements. "And what, pray tell, is this mysterious asset?" Jack allowed a sly smile to cross his face. "The one thing your AI can't predict, human nature. Alexander and I, we understand people in a way your algorithms never could. With our insights, Project Phoenix wouldn't just predict market trends, it could shape them." For a moment, Evelyn seemed to waver, the allure of even greater power warring with her suspicion. It was all the distraction they needed. In a flash, Sarah made her move. With a strength born of desperation, she elbowed the nearest guard in the solar plexus, sending him crumpling to the ground. In the same instant, Emily, proving that her skills extended beyond the digital realm, executed a perfect sweep kick that took another guard's legs out from under him. Chaos erupted in the narrow corridor. Jack lunged forward, tackling Evelyn to the ground as Alexander grappled with one of the remaining thugs. Senator Thompson, belying his age, moved with surprising agility, disarming another guard with a well-placed strike. Victoria, seizing the moment, rushed to a nearby control panel. Her fingers flew over the keypad, inputting a series of commands. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the complex, and the sprinkler system engaged, drenching everyone in a torrent of water. "No!" Evelyn screamed, struggling against Jack's hold. "You fools! Do you have any idea what you've done?" But her words were drowned out by a new sound, the wail of police sirens approaching rapidly from outside. As the sounds of law enforcement breaching the building echoed through the corridors, Evelyn's remaining henchmen threw down their weapons, realizing the game was up. Jack, soaked to the skin but grinning with relief, helped Sarah to her feet. "Perfect timing, as always," he said, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Sarah laughed, the sound tinged with hysteria and relief. "Well, someone had to save your backside." Again. As police officers flooded into the area, securing the suspects and ensuring everyone's safety, Jack looked around at the unlikely group of heroes who had come together to unravel this conspiracy. His family, the Blackwoods, a United States senator, all soaked to the bone, bruised, but triumphant. In the days that followed, the full scope of Evelyn Sinclair's plot was revealed to the world. Project Phoenix, it turned out, was even more insidious than they had imagined, a sophisticated AI system designed not just to predict market trends, but to manipulate global economies on an unprecedented scale. Alexander Blackwood, true to his word, cooperated fully with the authorities. In a press conference that made headlines around the world, he publicly apologized for his role in the early stages of Project Phoenix and vowed to use his resources to make amends. "I was blinded by ambition," he said, his voice heavy with remorse. "But thanks to the bravery and integrity of Jack Harper and his family, I've been given a second chance. I intend to use it wisely." As part of his restitution, Alexander not only reinstated Jack to his former position but also promoted him to head of corporate security, citing his unparalleled loyalty and keen instincts. The Harper family, for their part, found themselves thrust into an unexpected spotlight. Emily's hacking skills, instrumental in their success, caught the attention of several tech giants, who offered her internships and scholarships. Michael, whose quick thinking had played a crucial role in their infiltration of the complex, discovered a newfound confidence that transformed his approach to school and life. Senator Thompson, true to his word, used his political clout to ensure that the full story of Project Phoenix was made public, leading to sweeping reforms in financial regulations and AI oversight. Victoria Blackwood, inspired by the events, threw herself into philanthropic work, establishing a foundation to support whistleblowers and corporate watchdogs. As for Evelyn Sinclair, she faced a barrage of charges that ensured she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Her empire, built on lies and manipulation, crumbled in the wake of the revelations. On a warm summer evening, several months after the dramatic events at the Sinclair factory, the Harpers hosted a barbecue in their backyard. The mood was festive, a celebration of friendship, family, and the triumph of integrity over greed. Jack stood at the grill, expertly flipping burgers as he chatted with Alexander, their former employer-employee relationship having evolved into a genuine friendship. Sarah and Victoria sat nearby, deep in conversation about the Foundation's latest initiative. Emily and Michael, surrounded by friends, regaled them with, slightly embellished, tales of their adventures. Senator Thompson, who had become something of an honorary uncle to the Harper children, listened with an indulgent smile, occasionally chiming in with his own perspective on the events. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Jack called for everyone's attention. Raising his glass, he looked around at the faces of those who had stood by him in his darkest hour. "To family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just those we're born with, but those we choose. To friends who become family, and to the power of truth to overcome even the darkest of lies." A chorus of hear rose from the group as they clinked glasses. As Jack surveyed the scene, his children laughing with their friends, Sarah deep in conversation with Victoria, Alexander and Senator Thompson debating some point of policy, he felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He had lost his job, his home, and nearly his freedom. But in the crucible of those challenges, he had gained something far more precious, an unshakable faith in the power of integrity, the strength of family, and the enduring triumph of truth over deception. As the party continued into the night, filled with laughter, love, and the warmth of true friendship. Jack Harper knew that no matter what challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, stronger, wiser, and unbreakable. Epilogue. 1 year later, the Harper family stood on the steps of the newly inaugurated Harper Blackwood Center for Corporate Ethics. The sleek, modern building gleamed in the sunlight, a testament to the transformative power of their shared ordeal. Jack, looking distinguished in a suit that was a far cry from his old chauffeur's uniform, stepped up to the podium. Sarah squeezed his hand encouragingly as he cleared his throat to address the assembled crowd of journalists, business leaders, and well-wishers. A wise person once said that the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing, Jack began, his voice carrying across the hushed audience. A year ago, my family and I were faced with a choice: to stay silent in the face of injustice or to stand up for what we knew was right, no matter the cost. He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd, meeting the proud gazes of his children, the supportive smile of Sarah, the respectful nod from Alexander Blackwood. We chose to act, Jack continued, not because we were extraordinary people, but because we believed in the extraordinary power of truth. This center stands as a beacon of that belief, a commitment to fostering ethical business practices, to supporting whistleblowers, and to ensuring that the pursuit of profit never comes at the expense of integrity. As Jack's speech continued, outlining the center's mission and the lessons learned from the Project Phoenix scandal, a figure at the back of the crowd listened intently. Tom Reynolds, the journalist friend who had first helped Jack in his quest for truth, scribbled notes furiously, a smile playing on his lips. He knew a good story when he heard one, and the tale of Jack Harper, the chauffeur who took on a corporate giant and won, was the stuff of modern legends. In her high-security prison cell, Evelyn Sinclair watched the inauguration ceremony on a small television. Her face, once beautiful and commanding, was now lined with bitterness and defeat. As she listened to Jack's words about ethics and integrity, a mix of emotions played across her features: anger, regret, and perhaps, buried deep beneath the layers of resentment, a glimmer of grudging respect. Back at the ceremony, Jack concluded his speech to thunderous applause. As he stepped away from the podium, he was engulfed in a group hug by his family. Emily, now a rising star in the world of ethical hacking, beamed with pride. Michael, who had found his calling in youth advocacy, stood tall and confident. And Sarah, her eyes shining with love and admiration, kissed him softly. "Not bad for a chauffeur," she whispered teasingly. Jack laughed, pulling her close. "Not bad for any of us," he replied, looking around at the fruits of their collective courage and determination. As the Harper family mingled with the crowd, accepting congratulations and sharing their vision for a more ethical corporate world, they remained unaware of the ripple effects their actions had set in motion. Across the country, inspired by their story, employees were finding the courage to speak up against corporate malfeasance. Investors were demanding greater transparency. Lawmakers were drafting bills to close loopholes and strengthen protections for whistleblowers. The story of Jack Harper and Project Phoenix had become more than just a scandal, it had become a movement. That evening, as the family sat around their dining table, sharing a meal and recounting the day's events, Jack looked at each of their faces in turn. In Emily's determined gaze, he saw the future of ethical technology. In Michael's compassionate smile, he saw hope for the next generation of leaders. In Sarah's loving eyes, he saw the strength that had carried them through their darkest hours. And in his own heart, Jack felt a peace he had never known before. He had started this journey as a simple chauffeur, a man content to live in the background of other people's lives. Now, he had found his voice, his purpose, and in doing so, had helped to change the world for the better. As they raised their glasses in a quiet toast to their shared journey, Jack Harper knew that while their greatest adventure might be behind them, their most important work was just beginning. Together, they would continue to stand for truth, to fight for justice, and to prove that even in the face of overwhelming odds, integrity and love could triumph. The Harper family's story, once a simple tale of a chauffeur wronged, had become a beacon of hope for millions. And as they looked to the future, they did so not with fear or uncertainty, but with the unshakable conviction that as long as there were people willing to stand up for what was right, there would always be hope for a better tomorrow.